Be quick, cook the Indomie and give them to eat. I must have my revenge.
They called her Indomie the Miracle. In the dusty market of Ekun, where hunger was a drumbeat and life was worn, her noodles were a sharp, oily, peppered invitation, a taste that cut through the long day, making men leave work early and women drop their baskets. They came for warmth. They came for taste. They came hungry. But Adaora held a secret. Her smile arrived a breath later than her mouth, and her hand moved with the careful grace of someone who had learned to hide her hands. A year ago, the villagers took her twin sister, Amara, a girl blamed for strange things. They dragged her to a stake. They set the wood, and Adaora could only scream. And the sweet, spicy aroma of Adaora's noodles has taken on a scent the village herbalist swore did not belong in soup. Salim felt a whisper like a snake curled around his ribs after eating her dish. Unbelievable. What is Adaora truly feeding the people of Ekun? Is it nourishment, or is it a slow, terrible revenge? How will this end? After watching this, you'll never eat Indomie noodles. The market of Ekun folded itself into the evening like a fan closing, slow, crisp, full of small noises. Smoke braided with the last heat of the day. Chickens argued in the corners. Children chased one another between stalls. In the center of it all stood a wooden cart painted the color of sunflowers. Steam rose from a black pot beneath a bent kettle, and the smell, sharp, oily, peppered, moved through the crowd like an invitation. Adaora moved behind that cart with the careful grace of someone who had learned to hide her hands. She was tall for a woman of the village, shoulders steady, bones easy under her clothes. Her hair was braided close to her head with a strip of yellow cloth wound at the crown, the same color her sister once wore. Her face was a map, a small white scar along the jaw, eyes the dark brown of river stones, and a smile that arrived a breath later than her mouth. She dressed in bright cotton, tidy but worn. Her apron smelled of palm oil and crushed pepper. When she laughed, the villagers said it made the air warmer. People called her Indomie the Miracle. Her noodles came boiling, the spice cutting through hunger like a drumbeat. Children tugged at pockets for coins. Men left their work early. Women put down market baskets and came running. The old rice seller folded his stall and went home. The man who sold beans boarded up his wooden front and watched Adaora's queue grow like a plant sucking at the sun. Adaora stirred with a wooden spoon that had burned smooth by years of use. Steam kissed her wrist. The noodles curved like pale hair in the pot, and when she lifted them with a tined fork, oil glinted, chilies browned, and the scent burned neat lines through the marketplace. She ladled into bowls with the small ritual gestures of someone who knew how desire began. A pinch of powdered soup, a squeeze of lime if the day was kind, a dash of secret pepper. Children watched, mouths half open. They come for warmth. They come for taste. They come hungry for anything that eases the hollow. Adaora's thoughts moved like that, slow, small, as if the voice was not entirely her own. They will remember her name. They will taste her. The thought did not feel like hers, and yet it sat behind her ribs like a second heartbeat. One of the first to come that evening was Salim, a young man with a mouth that always wanted more. His shirt was patched. His hands were soft from work that did not demand strength. He ate in secret at night, 2 bowls at a time, palms warm around the ceramic, steam fogging his glasses. The first bite made his eyes widen. Noodles slid home, and the spice braced his tongue, sweet then sharp, like a song that turned into an accusation. "This one is strong," Salim said, voice small with awe. That pepper, it bites." Adaora laughed. "You like it, Salim? Take more. No one should sleep hungry." Her voice was sugar. Her hand brushed his knuckles as she passed him another plate. The touch was brief and exact, like the closing of a lid. "Eat more. Eat until you cannot remember what you once feared," whispered a softer voice inside her that sounded like wind through dry leaves. The voice felt like a memory. Amara's voice, the twin who had been taken and burned a year ago. The villagers did not speak the name Amara much now. When they did, it was like tapping a sore tooth. The story had been sharp and final. Strange things were blamed on her. Cows found dead, a rain that hit in the wrong season, and fingers pointed. One night, they dragged her to a stake and set the wood. Adaora had screamed in the crowd, hands clawing the air. She had been turned away. She had not saved her sister. They thought she was gone. They were wrong. At dusk, the king's shadow crossed the market. He was young for a king, with a small crown that sat like a question atop his hair and a robe too long for the market dust. He came without guards, slipping between the stalls like a man hoping not to be seen. He took a bowl under the eaves and ate with a thin, hungry smile. Power, he had learned, did not protect you from wanting a warm thing on a cold night. No one must know, the king thought, watching Adaora's back. A king who eats in the open is laughed at in the court. But tonight, this heat tastes like the mornings I keep for my children. He licked his fingers, and for a moment his face softened. The spice left a ring of red at his lips. He left some coins hidden beneath a stone where none could find them, but still enough for Adaora to discover later. His pleasure was small and private. His guilt made him walk straighter. Among the watchers was the village herbalist, though he kept his distance. He had known herbs for 30 years and believed he understood the body. He saw the market and the queue and turned his head as if to look away. Still, his hands twitched. He smelled something that did not belong in soup, the faint copper of old iron, the scent of something burned and kept. As night sank, lanterns blinked on like tired eyes. Laughter loosened. Adaora counted plates with a careful sound. Coins clinked into a little box carved with a bird. Children pressed one by one to her cart, and she made small jokes, the kind that made their shoulders drop, the kind that let them trust. Around the edge of the market, voices began to fold into worry. He ate the night his mother died, an old woman muttered. He was the first to close his stall. Another, her hair. She wears Amara's color. A pause. She came back too soon. When an illness took the first notice, a boy who cried at night, skin hot, fingers cold, they blamed the heat. But the heat did not leave. The boy's stomach began to twitch at odd hours, as if something slithered along the inside of him. He woke, hands on his belly, face white as cloth. Salim slept that night, with his mouth tasting of pepper and the memory of laughter. He woke to a whispering like a snake curled around his ribs. At first he thought it was hunger. Then the whisper tightened, his stomach bucked. He clutched the mattress as if hands were there. Sweat slicked his hairline. It moves, he thought, every blink a small betrayal. It is alive. He rolled off the mat, palms pressed to his gut, breath chopping. The world narrowed to a single sound, a wet, soft shifting that made his teeth ache. He reached for the door, a simple pull, and found his legs betrayed, like ropes cut at the wrong time. Down in the market, Adaora wiped a cup and watched the dark like a woman who kept vigil. Her smile did not falter as she swept. Children slept with the scent of noodles in their hair. The coins were warm in her palm. She smelled Salim's oil and the pepper on his breath on the wind, and the thing inside her, the other voice, hummed an old song. They will line up. They will eat. They will laugh. They must all taste the story we never told them, it said. The voice said it softly, with the patient cruelty of someone who had waited long in the cold. Outside Salim's window, the night pulled at the thatch. A woman from the next hut heard a sound and crossed the small yard, bare feet on dirt, light in her hand. She knocked and found him doubled over, eyes wide, mouth working as if someone had put a fish there. She called for help. The sound was a thin thread. Back on the cart, Adaora slumped for a moment and closed her eyes. Her fingers left a wet ring on the wood. The market's noise dimmed, and for one thin second, her face was not her own. A small laugh, like a match struck and blown out, escaped her lips. A scream came from Salim's hut like a bell thrown. It cut the night into pieces. People ran. The herbalist came first, lantern shaking, hands moving as if to open the body with his eyes. He saw Salim on the floor, eyes rolled as if he were looking at a place inside himself, fingers clawing. The herbalist knelt and touched his forehead. The skin was slick. The boy's voice came out as a thin thread. It crawls under my skin. Adaora watched from the market shadow. The lantern light painted the lines of her face. She did not move toward him. Her smile was small and bright and very still. They taste the truth for the first time, the other voice said, and Adaora's chest felt like two hearts beating not quite together. The herbalist stared at Salim, then at the cart, then at Adaora. The market smelled suddenly of iron and oil and something older, like the ash left when a house burns. A hush folded over the people, the kind of quiet that listens for footsteps in a place where no one should walk. The story tightened at that hush. The night held its breath. In the dark, Adaora's yellow cloth fluttered like a small, defiant flag. "Is she the same?" someone whispered. Adaora answered nothing. She turned the spoon in her empty pot and listened to the sound of the wood against metal, a rhythm that could be prayer, or counting, or a slow beat toward another night. Above them, the moon watched like a plain eye. Below, a shape moved inside a young man's belly, and it made him make sounds no one in Ekun knew how to stop. Close up on a steaming pot, the camera lingers on the silver ring of steam, the red oil that swims like blood on the surface. Plates clatter. Laughter drifts from the market. People line up at Adaora's stall as if drawn by a bell. Adaora stood behind that stall like a bright moth. She was tall enough to see over a crowd, lean from long walks, her skin the color of dark mahogany. Her hair was braided tight against her head, a single bright scarf tied at the nape, blue like the river. Her eyes were the village's last puzzle, warm when she smiled, hard and distant when they met yours for too long. Her clothes were clean but simple, a worn cotton wrapper, a yellow blouse with small sun stains where she had wiped her hands. She moved with a quiet, practiced grace, hands fast and sure as she tossed noodles into boiling water. People called her gentle. They saw only the gentle face. "They call me gentle," she thought once. Then another voice slid through, a colder whisper, not her own. "They burn me. Let them taste the ashes." Her palm hovered over the pot. Her smile stayed. Mama Nkechi came to the stall every morning. She was short and round-shouldered, the years carved into the lines beside her mouth. Her son had been 20 summers. His laughter had been the steadiness of her day. Now his bed lay empty much of the day, and the house smelled of old sweat and a sadness that would not wash away. She wore a faded wrapper and a small brass bead in one ear, a keepsake from the son she had buried. Poverty had bent her back, but not her determination. She carried grief like a warm stone. If Adaora's noodles are what they say, she thought as she watched the steam curl, then let them be, only if they can bring my boy back. Her fingers shook as she reached for a plate. The sickness started like a lazy dream. First an ache that people blamed on the harvest or the river. Then a low humming beneath the ribs, like something alive testing the walls. Boys who had run and climbed without breath now sat with their hands pressed to their bellies, faces gray. The first to cry out was a man who lived by the yam barn. He clutched his stomach with both hands, his nails digging crescents into his palms. "It feels moving," he said. His voice fell away into a thin line of sound. People whispered of worms. The herbalist, Okoro, came with a bundle of bitter leaves and the smell of smoke on his breath. He was a tall man with weathered fingers and a voice that always rustled when he spoke. He had braided salt and pepper hair and a leather pouch of remedies. He inspected the thin bodies with the same careful look a potter gives clay. Okoro's hands were rough and certain. He boiled herbs, pounded roots, and the market filled with the sharp scent of bitter green. He laid leaves against a child's belly and pressed with thumbs that had long known where pain hides. But his eyes widened behind the same practiced brow. He had seen fevers, poisons, and cold curses. This was not any of those. "It is like something eats from the inside," he said, and his words thudded against the ears of those who listened. He had no remedy for being eaten. Adaora kept cooking. Her noodles were a tight, addictive bite, spicy, tangy, with a smoky edge that made you forget your hunger and remember only that last mouth. When a neighbor gasped and clutched her belly a few palms away, Adaora stepped forward, frowning with practiced concern. "Eat this," she said, soft as the cloth she used to wipe hands, pressing a plate into trembling hands. Take more. You will be well. Her voice made the market feel safer for a moment, like the sun finding a cold stone. They will taste me and call me Mercy, she thought, and the other voice hummed under the thought like a trapped bee. They will call Mercy before they know the hunger. Her fingers brushed the rim of the pot. The steam ghosted her skin like a lover's breath. Mama and Ketchy watched from behind a narrow cassava stall. She watched Adaora's hands, slender, precise, as she stirred. Adaora's lips moved in shapes the widow could not hear from where she hid. A soft syllable, then another, as if the woman were reciting names into the boiling. In the moonlight, Mama and Ketchy swore she saw something like a red thread flicker at Adaora's eyes, no more than the flash of a coal. That woman is smiling like a god, Mama and Ketchy thought, the thought bitter as unripe guava. But my son is whispering at night, bending double with cold that does not come from a wind. She slid closer, pressing her back to a tree that smelled of dry sap. The bark scratched her cheek through a wrapper. She felt the texture under her palm, roughed grooves like fingerprints of time. Adaora dipped a spoon and tasted her own pot. She closed her eyes and folded her face into a shape that could be pity or hunger. She leaned down and breathed the steam. It sank in her throat and made her mouth water. She added a pinch of something from a small clay pot tucked beneath her table, powder dark as soot, with a smell of ash and something sweet under it. Her fingers trembled for a heartbeat. She spoke low, and the words were half a lullaby and half a promise. Okoro's face grew harder with each visit. He gathered bellies in his lap, turned them as if reading a map. He pressed his palm to a woman's cheek and felt the skin slide like a thin curtain over a hollow. He opened the dead man's mouth and peered into a throat that made his stomach flip. He had been a healer for near 30 years. His hands had fixed sprained ankles and taken boils clean. But when he tried his strongest tonic, bitter bark, smoke, bones crushed with salt, his hands came away damp and empty. Something answers the medicine, Okoro whispered, and his voice had the weight of an old man speaking of lightning. By dusk, the market had thinned. Chairs sat under the acacia in crooked lines. Adaora lit a small lamp and tucked her scarf tighter. She moved among the few left, passing plates and pats of reassurance. People chewed slowly, eyes closing. Their mouths smiled as if in sleep. The spices burned briefly like riding a red wave, and then the faces slackened, the laughter turning thin and brittle. Mama and Ketchy stepped closer now, the dirt of the lane cold under her feet. Her son lay on a mat, his belly tight and hard. He pressed fingers to his tongue as if to find words, but spoke only in breath. His forehead sweated. He clenched at her hand and said, "Mama, I feel live things." The way he said it made her lungs lift and drop as if she had been pushed. "Do not be foolish," people said to her in the market. "The sickness comes from river water from last month's rains." But she had seen Adaora at night. She had watched the woman's lips move while stirring the pot. She had felt something like a river chill crawl along her ankle when she stepped back. The hair on her arms rose. She grabbed her son's shirt and pulled him upright. "Listen to me," she whispered, loud with an edge she had not used since the burial. "You will come with me. We will go to the chief. We will make them look." Her voice was a thin rope. It trembled but did not break. If you're enjoying this video, kindly give a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button. This action may seem simple, but it means a lot to us as we go through a lot trying to come up with this video for you. Thank you. Adaora watched from across the thinning market. For a moment, something like regret, like the memory of a sister trapped in a burning place, rolled across her face. She opened her mouth, then closed it. She walked to the stall and reached beneath the table. Her fingers closed on the small clay pot of ash. The night wind lifted the scarf at her throat and made her hair braid click against her collarbone. Mama and Ketchy moved to speak. She took 2 quick steps toward Adaora, and then the world changed. Something touched the back of her neck. Not a hand of flesh, but like a cold leaf dragged across bone. It said nothing. It pressed. The breath left her in a sharp, soundless sound. She spun, but there was nothing there but the empty lane and the thin moon. Her knees went soft. Her palms slapped against the tree bark. Her voice rose in a scream, a raw thing ripped from her throat. No one came. The market held its breath, as if waiting for a drum that would not come. The scream swallowed itself in the wind. The tree's shadow wrapped her like a blanket. Adaora's lips curved, small and unreadable. Okoro dropped the bundle of leaves he had been crushing. The sound cracked the night, a dry, sudden noise. Then he bent and scooped up the herb with shaking hands. He did not look toward the lane where Mama and Ketchy had fallen. He had never seen such a cold take a woman before. In the steaming pot, rice and noodles shimmered under a thin skin of oil. The little clay pot of ash sat tucked and secret. The smell of spices rose like a promise. Someone at the back of the square whispered, half prayer, half warning, "They eat, but what eats them?" The question hung heavy and unanswered. The market clock of the night kept moving. The stars were sharp. The steam grew thicker, and Adaora stirred again. The market woke like a slow drum. Goats bleating, children chasing one another, the smell of roasted corn and smoke curling into the morning air. Into that ordinary noise stepped the prophet. He was neither old nor young, a man with a lean face cut by a long scar, a gray beard braided in one thin rope, and eyes the color of river stones. His robe was patched but clean, wrapped tight against the dust. A wooden staff, worn smooth by many hands, tapped the earth as he walked. People stopped. Even Adaora, who stood behind her steaming pot of Indomie, lifted her head and watched. They will listen, the prophet thought, feeling the town settle around him like a bull catches water. If the vision calls, I must speak so they may see what hides beneath their bowls. He placed his staff in the dirt, closed his eyes, and let the market sound drift away into a hush. Adaora moved like a bright bird. Her wrapper was a ribbon of yellow and red. Her hair braided close to her head with a strip of blue cloth tied at the nape. Her smile was quick and easy, the kind that pulled customers close. She ladled noodles into bowls with practiced hands, the steam rising like faint ghosts. People loved the spice on their tongues. They praised her. She accepted the praise and kept stirring. Sometimes her fingers trembled ever so slightly as she lifted her pot, but she covered the shake with a laugh. They remember her voice. Something inside Adaora whispered, lower than her own breath, softer than the market wind. They burned her, but they could not keep me from them. Adaora blinked, and the whisper faded. She looked toward the prophet with a polite tilt of her head, and the muscles at her throat tightened for a breath she did not take. At the center of the market, the king sat on a low stool under a cracked parasol. King Obinna was broad, his robe heavy with silk that used to shine. Years had rubbed the gold on his crown dull. His fingers were thick and stained from ink and coin. He watched the prophet with a face practiced in control. He had led Ekun for many seasons. People trusted him. He liked to think dread belonged to others. Let him come with thunder and lies, the king thought, feeling his stomach like a tightened sack. I will not tremble. I will not feed fear. Yet, under the skin near his knuckles, something prickled, like a tiny insect finding a warm place to settle. He rubbed his hand on his robe and smiled too broadly. The prophet sat cross-legged in the dirt and began to pray. His voice started low, a rhythm like the tapping of rain. The crowd sorted itself into a ring around him. Children drifted closer, their feet leaving patterns in the dust. The prophet's breath changed. His fingers flexed on the staff. The sun dipped behind a cloud, and all the air seemed to hold its breath with him. The vision came as a sudden heat inside his chest. His eyes widened. He saw with his mind as clearly as if the past were a stage before him. He saw two girls standing side by side in flames that did not burn skin but shone like orange glass. One girl covered her face and wept. The other smiled with a face fuller and harder. They tied her. The prophet whispered aloud even as the world blurred. They burned her for what they feared. Now the fire returns in another shape. In his vision, the smiling girl's hands were stained with soot. From her palms spilled thin, pale things, threads like white roots. They went into the earth, into the bellies of people, into the quiet of dark rooms. He felt a cold wind around his ankles, smelled ash and something sweet and rotten. The crowd listened as if the sky itself were telling a secret. Some crossed themselves. Others looked away. Adaora's hand stilled on the ladle. The color left a few faces. The king's smile faltered for the briefest second. Adaora watched the prophet and felt the old thing within shift. Amara's voice, the name that once lived only in graves, moved like a slow chord through her chest. They will taste and forget, Amara said inside her like a bell struck underwater. They will eat and the root will feed. They will remember only spice until it is too late. Adaora's lips curved. The motion was small. No one saw the two faces that moved like a fish beneath still water. The prophet's eyes opened. He spoke, and every word landed like a stone. Listen, people of Ekun. I walked with spirits. I saw what your fear did to a girl named Amara. I saw her return. The one who sells you warmth has ashes on her tongue. A woman in the crowd gasped. A child began to cry. The market seemed to press inward until only the circle of the prophet and the noodle pot existed. King Obinna rose slowly. Prophet, he said, voice thin but held like a cord, speak plainly. No man scares me with tales. The prophet did not answer at once. He looked at the king as if reading lines beneath the skin. His hand went to the staff as if to steady himself, and because staff comforted him. Then he stepped forward and touched the king's hand. Not cruelly, only with firm insistence. The king felt that prickling again, stronger now, like an ant trail across the flesh. He almost laughed to hide it. Instead, his jaw worked. What do you mean? He asked. It has returned in a dish, the prophet said. The burned sister walks in the body of the living. She feeds them, and the feeding grows small threads in their bellies. Those threads grow, and they eat the inside of a man while he sleeps. The prophet's voice did not rise. It was steady and true. If you will not listen, look. He turned his head and looked at the king as if the king were a chapter in a book he could not stop reading. At first, nothing happened. The king stood proud, letting his robes fall like a curtain. Then, as if some small animal remembered its place under the floorboards, a thin white line pushed past the fold of a fingernail. It was tiny, a pale, shining thread no longer than a grain of rice. The king's face changed fully now, surprise, then a hot, wild fear like a bird trapped against glass. People saw it. A low sound, a mix of a sob and a laugh, slid through the crowd. Fingers that moments ago reached for bowls now clutched cloth. Adaora's smile tightened. Her breath came quick and shallow, and her fingertips felt the steam from the pot like a language. They see the thread. Amara hummed, close and glad and terrible. Do you feel it? They will call us monster. They will call us justice. Adaora's throat moved. She let the spoon fall into the pot so that the metal struck the side with a soft, bright ring. The sound was loud in the sudden silence. The prophet's face was carved from something older than anger. King Obinna, he said softly, do you still doubt? The spirit that burned will claim what burned her. You can chase me from your palace, but you cannot chase what lives in the night. He raised his staff, and the dust at his feet rose like a small cloud. King Obinna lurched back, his fingers scrabbling at his robe to hide the proof. He was used to power that saw things, laws, punishments coin. Here, in the ring of market light, his power was thin as paper. The itch under his nail crawled deeper, and his breath began to come in quick, shallow pulls. The prophet stepped away and let his words hang in the air like incense. People shifted, some reached for their children. Adaora watched each face like a reader turning a page. Her heart, or the thing that moved in her chest, kept time with the steam from the pot. She tasted spice on her tongue and something else that felt like iron and ash. Soon, Amara whispered. Soon, and the whisper was like wine through dry grass. No one in the market could say what came next. The prophecy had left a mark, a thread under the king's nail, a voice that would not be silenced, a woman with a pot of noodles who smiled as if she had won. The prophet folded his hands and looked at the sky as if expecting a sign. The king ran a cloth over his fingers until the cloth came away stained. Adaora ladled another bowl and handed it to a man whose eyes avoided hers. The camera of the mind, the way minds hold moments, zoomed close on the king's fingernail, on the pale thread that had appeared and now lay like a secret on his skin. Then it panned slowly to Adaora's face, watching, waiting. There was no answer yet to the prophet's cry. Only a market whose day had been split into before and after. Only a pot that steamed, and a woman who smiled in the steam, and a whisper inside her that promised the taste of slow, careful revenge. Let them come to me, Amara breathed through Adaora. Let them bring their hunger. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed the story. I am working on part 2 of the story to upload it soon. Subscribe to my channel so you will be notified once I upload it. See you soon.